You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
All right, LA football fans, USC Trojan fans, as we alluded to in the intro, have a very special guest with us. Very excited to welcome him on to the LA Football Show and get into this huge matchup coming up on Friday. He is one of the great voices, great employees of the Pac-12 network, obviously has history in the Pac-12 and coaching, playing college football as well at the University of Pittsburgh. The great Yogi Roth. What's up, man? How you doing? Thanks for joining the show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I love what you guys have built and what you're doing. So congratulations on that. And what a year in LA in college football, at least. So it's been enjoyable, I'm sure, for you on a bunch of levels as well.
Yeah, we were joking, Yogi. We've been so fortunate. We started this network just about 2.5 years ago, and we get last year, a year in, the Rams go and win the Super Bowl, and now this year we get USC with a potential Pac-12 championship and maybe more after that in the college football playoffs. So we've been real fortunate and blessed to cover some great football, and this year has been a special year with USC. And I want to start off. We met actually at USC Media Day. What was that now? 2-3 months ago at the beautiful USC campus. And, it was a great event that they had done. They said the first time, I can't remember if they said the first time ever or just in a long time, but meeting all the players and coaches. And, Lincoln Riley said, I'm paraphrasing, but right when he opened it up said, we aren't shooting for, the floor. Like, we're shooting for the whole thing. We're shooting for the championship here. We believe we can do that. Did you in any right mind think that was actually feasible and where we are today, way back when in August?
I thought the championship in the league would be feasible. I thought getting to the championship would be feasible. I did not think that they would go through the whole season with just one loss. Thus, when you look at the history of the CFP, as we all know and have talked about for over a month now, is no two-loss team has ever gotten in. So I didn't anticipate them being on the precipice of doing something that hasn't been done for USC ever in terms of the college football playoff. So no, I didn't see this. I thought Oregon State, I thought they would come out on the other end of that one. When I kind of looked at the season and how it was laid out, Utah, I didn't think they would get that one. They didn't get that one in a beautiful game. Then the UCLA game was going to be tight, but I always felt like they'd beat Notre Dame and launch themselves into the conversation for everything next year, knowing that Caleb was coming back, the foundation would be set. And I got to say, man, like what Lincoln has done has been incredible. Right? I go to one of my favorite people of all time is Chris Peterson. He's a top 3 coach to me ever. Pete Carroll, Chris Peterson, David Shaw. Like in terms of integrity, football acumen, you name it. And when Chris got hired at UW, I flew up and interviewed him. And I said, how long does it take to instill a culture? And without batting an eye, he goes, 18 months. So that's always kind of been like my default. It takes 18 months. It takes 18 months. It takes 18 months. And it's been less than 12 months. And Lincoln Riley has instilled a brilliant culture where it is built on blind trust because they had to do that. As Caleb Williams said earlier today, here we record this Tuesday, that it was built on, hey, this was going to be a player-led team. And it was one where there's a lot of ownership given by the coaches, presented by the coaches to the players in terms of how to become a championship team. So for them to do it in the fashion, style, and efficiency that they have has been absolutely phenomenal to watch it here in LA.
Yeah, Yogi, it's so interesting that you mentioned that. Ryan and I, a couple of days ago, were referencing a quote by Caleb in his last press conference where he said, great teams are led by the players, good teams are led by the coaches, and bad teams are led by nobody. And it really kind of speaks to what you're talking about here. Yogi, before we jump into the game, have to talk a little bit about Caleb Williams and what he's meant to this program and this season. Well in line. He's now, a 10-11 favorite in Vegas to win the Heisman Trophy. It would be USC's 3rd quarterback to win the Heisman Trophy. Where does he rank in your mind in terms of all-time greatest USC quarterbacks? And what have you sort of felt and experienced about him this year that's maybe surprised you?
All-time great is a fun conversation. We've done that on a couple of broadcasts where we've called SC. I think we had him 3 times this year. And I don't know if I can go all time, because I think the game's changed so much. But in my lifetime of being around SC, I'd say Carson and Matt had always been the leaders in the clubhouse, right? Coach Carroll would often tell me about Carson and, heading into that first year. And then, of course, that second year where he becomes Heisman Trophy winner. They win the Orange Bowl. And he was just phenomenal in every way, as an athlete, as a competitor. And then you look at what he's done in the league. To me, he's always been there. Matt, to me, is one of the greatest college quarterbacks of all time based on how they won. And I got to see that up close. I mean, my first year on the staff at SC was when we lost to Texas, but I had been around the program every spring break at their big bowl games when I was still playing in college. So I got to really be inside that, I think, in a unique perspective. And Matt had a swagger about him, a cool factor about him, a work ethic about him in college that I don't think ever gets painted accurately based on how his pro career went. So those two guys are always a kind of a cut above. You can't argue what John David did in terms of winning 2 Rose Bowls in record style, right? What Mark did in his 1 year and the game that he had to finish it off against Penn State in that game. And then I even look at like what Sam has done and Barkley, what he had done amid the time that he was there. So it's hard for me to kind of say yet because there hasn't been a period on this season in terms of where he sits. But talent-wise, he might be the most talented of them all. Like he really might be. Carson was so elite with his arm. He doesn't have a cannon like that, but he can move, he can throw on the move, and all the stuff that we've seen that just makes our jaw drop. I mean, bro, I'm preparing for the pregame show at 3:30 Pacific on Friday on the Pac-12 networks, and I'm putting together my case for why Caleb is the best player in America. So I've watched every single play of his back today, and it is so hard to pick 5 plays. My producer's like, I want 2, and I'm like, you got to give me 5 at least because there's so much to his game. So long-winded, but I think it warrants a long-winded answer because he hasn't put a period on a season. I anticipate he'll win the Heisman, so he'll be in the dialogue among those greats. He has a seat at that table. But I think with how he wins will probably impact the ranking. But, man, I think he might be more talented in 12 games that we've seen. If you comp the first 12 of Carson, the first 12 of Matt, the first 12 of any of those other guys, Caleb's number 1. But I'd love to talk about it after 24 or 20, whatever games it would be this time next year.
Yeah, such a special talent, special player, special young man, just the leadership that he has and the intangibles. And I think what Jamal and I have loved so much, and obviously we cover, the other school across town, UCLA and DTR, and obviously you've called games for there and you know DTR as well. And special athlete DTR is, but I think what Caleb does so well, it separates is in those big time moments, those gotta have it moments. Like, the ball's going to be in his hands and he's going to deliver, against Oregon State, against Arizona, when they had that 4th and 1 and he did the QB sneak. In other instances where whether it's running with the QB sneak or just a pivotal 3rd down long conversion with a beautiful pass, evading pressure. That's, I think, what separated him thus far so early in his career. And now we can just watch him hopefully build on that, which is going to be so fun to just see him have a whole other year, which is insane to think about as a fan and someone covering him. So, but before I got one more, Yogi, before we get to the game, and I'll let Jamal then get into the game on his next question. But just looking at the Pac-12 this year, I think it's been such a special year. It might be one of the strongest we've seen this conference that I can think of, at least as of late. 6 teams as of the college football playoff rankings coming out in the top 17. UCLA, a 9-win team and finishing 6th in the conference. We were talking on our show yesterday that UCLA would be 1st in the Big Ten West. If that's where they were, they would be playing Michigan in the Big Ten championship this year. And they're 6th in the Pac-12. So just what's been your thoughts on the overall conference and how special to this conference has been so far?
Well, number 1, I'm stealing that and using that on Friday. Be ready for that in the pregame show. That's amazing.
Love it.
Yeah, I'm really proud of it. I just got off of a show where, I think what often happens is we slip back into what we know and what has been imprinted on our brains in college football, which is the SEC reigns, the Big Ten is coming, and then there's everybody else other than Clemson. And that's not reality. To your point of the most recent ranking, 6 teams in the top 17 from the PAC, 5 from the SEC, 3 from the Big Ten. I think 1 or 2 from the ACC, 2 from the Big 12. It's just a fact. I mean, it's just an absolute fact, and period. And then I look at the passers, and I said this at media days in LA in late July, and I'll say it now. I take the top 6 quarterbacks in the Pac-12 over every other conference's top 6. And I used to say, well, I don't know about the top because I understand Bryce and CJ are at the top in the Big Ten and the SEC. But now there's a conversation at the top because Caleb Williams might win the Heisman. To me, Michael Penix Jr. needs to be invited to New York City. And as a Heisman voter, he will be on my ballot because of what he's done. 10-2 season, top 3 win of the season on the road at Oregon, the throw of the year in college football, leads the nation in passing, leads the nation in third down passing, doesn't turn it over much like Caleb, 27-7 is touchdown interception ratio. Like Bo Nix, if they won the game, would be a Heisman candidate and probably a finalist. Like that's just the top 3. And then we could debate Dorian, Delora, Cam Rising, Cameron Ward. Freaking Tanner McKee might be one of the first quarterbacks drafted this year. He's in the conversation at least now, pending what mock draft you follow. So yeah, it's been really cool to watch this league ascend, especially at the end of June when SC and UCLA and that news dropped around them presumably going to the Big Ten. It was worrisome, to say the least, what's going to happen. And what have we seen? We've seen our league emerge. And it's going to, it's a bummer to see 1 and likely 2 teams leave. But I think we all would look at this league now and say, well, Oregon's not going anywhere. UW's not going anywhere in terms of ability, playmaking, winning games, winning big games, winning non-conference games. Washington State on the road at Wisconsin, for instance. It was an awesome year. And what I hope happens, because what did bother me about the most recent rankings, and I look at Tennessee, and I get it that they've got a talented backup quarterback who at one time was a starter at multiple schools, and they blew out Vanderbilt. But I look at them. Penn State doesn't have a quality win on the season. They've got 2 big beatdown losses to teams ranked higher than them. Clemson, we don't know who's at quarterback for them. And K-State lost to Tulane, which is a top 25 team. But I look at Washington and Utah, Washington specifically, even Oregon State, where they are ranked. And I'm saying to myself, New Year's 6 conversation. Like the league's still not being respected enough in that regard. So I don't want to just say, we're happy, it's cool, 6 teams, top 17. No. Take Oregon State against any team ranked higher than them. Put them on a neutral field. Tell me who you pick. Like you can't argue facts of what we've seen. Washington and that explosive offense. Who would you pick? So I still think there's some work to be done, but you're right. It's been a magnificent year coming from where the conference had been.
Yogi, shifting gears and such thoughtful analysis on your part into this game itself. USC and Utah, the rematch, so to speak, the one blemish on USC's otherwise perfect record, that epic game in Salt Lake, 43-42. Everyone remembers Utah was behind the whole game, takes the lead with 48 seconds to go on that 2-point conversion, QB run by Cam Rising, and SC just kind of ran out of time there with the ball. How do you see this rematch play out? Obviously, SC has recovered after that loss very well, had a couple tune-up type games with Cal in Colorado, and then really showed up huge against UCLA and Notre Dame. Utah, maybe a little bit more ebb and flow, recovered, bounced back, had that tough one in Eugene, but now has found a way back into this game. So much conversation around Dalton Kincaid and the USC linebackers and their middle part of their zone. So much conversation around now Austin Jones bringing an element that maybe Travis Dye did not. So much conversation around Cam Rising maybe salvaging his season a little bit in this game. What are your big takeaways from this game? What are you excited about, and how do you ultimately see it play out?
Great question. Loved the depth and insight that you brought. I look at this game as a true championship game. Purdue, Michigan, not really. LSU, Georgia, no thanks. After what we saw in the game against A&M over the weekend. ACC title game, meh, Big 12, into it. TCU and having to beat a repeat opponent. We'll see every league, I think, follow suit of the Big 12 and the Pac-12 in terms of eliminating divisions to get the 2 best teams in. And I say that because I love that for this game. I love the stakes in this game. It's why the commissioner, George Kliavkoff, and Merton Hanks, who runs football, presented this to the coaches and ADs who eventually voted on it and approved this model, is so you get the 2 best teams. And I get fans in Seattle don't like hearing that right now, but based on the agreed upon structure, this is where we sit. 2 teams from the former Pac-12 South playing, 2 teams that already played this year in the game you brilliantly described, and 2 teams that I think are playing the best offense in the country in terms of USC. Can't argue it. Look at any team ranked higher than them and tell me there's an offense better than them. I don't think it exists. I think you could look in this game and send 3 wideouts to the Biletnikoff Award in Dalton Kincaid, Jordan Addison, and Mario Williams. I get it. None of them are going, and all 3 of them have missed games or elements of games due to injury, but their talent will be felt on Sundays moving forward. With that said, you've got a defense that is emerging as the number 1 or 2 defense in the PAC. Oregon State, I think, has been the most consistent all year long. Wazoo was impressive, but you can't ignore over 700 yards they gave up last weekend. And I've watched Utah, and I've called a bunch of their games this season. This linebacking core from Florida, where they had 20 missed tackles, to the USC game, where they struggled sometimes finishing plays, to the last couple games. And I get it. Bo Nix was injured. Colorado's not very good. But, man, they're playing so sound. They're playing so fast. Junior Tafuna is probably the best interior defensive lineman in this league. Jonah Ellis, is he going to play? First question I have. Because he and Tuli Tuipulotu are the best edge rushers in the league. Clark Phillips, is he going to play? He's the best nickel defender, you could argue, in the country. And what's he going to do matching up on Jordan Addison, who just destroys people, right? Like, those are huge questions for Utah. Those 2 guys don't play, it's going to be hard, I think, for them to stop USC, because it's hard to stop them anyway. So I'd go there. Let's assume everybody's healthy. I love this matchup because I think USC's offensive line is really impressive, and this defensive front and the linebackers for the Utes are getting ridiculously impressive. This will be the best defense in the league next year. Can they finish on Caleb? Can they, as Kyle Whittingham said this week, can they put him in a cage and not let him out? Nobody has. So I don't think we should assume that Utah is going to be perfect, but can they be opportunistic? And then when you flip it, to me, that's where the game is really going to be told. Not just about Dalton Kincaid and eliminating 16 catches on 16 targets, but can a receiver for Utah elevate? I don't know. They have at times, they haven't at times. We've seen him make big plays. We've seen him drop big plays. Who's at running back? Jaquindon Jackson looks the part. I called their game over the weekend. He is a thumper. He's a downhill back. But 2 months ago, he's a quarterback. You know, like, does he have it in this game against Eric Gentry, the most impactful player in the league? Tuli, the defensive player of the year, is what I would imagine he'll be. I don't know. Like, I love that part of this game, that Utah offensive front 7 and Cam Rising, who's finally healthy again, like he was against SC, against that front 7. SC that's finally healthy with Eric Gentry, you know, getting some of the rust off in the game against Notre Dame.
Yeah, and so many USC fans, Yogi, I think, were wanting this rematch, and me personally, I wasn't really, just because Utah is the team that scares me the most, just with how well coached they are, with Kyle Whittingham, with the great Cam Rising and what they're able to do, and obviously it being the one loss, the one kind of shining grace, I guess, that me and Jamal talk about. And this is no disrespect, but Utah definitely a very different team at home or not at home. So the fact this is neutral turf, hopefully not hopefully, but we'll see differences, I think, in this game as opposed to playing at that Salt Lake, which is just such an amazing home field, that the raucous crowd there. I mean, that I had friends there that said that's the loudest they've ever heard a stadium in. And they've been at, you know, Mile High in Denver. They've been in Kansas City, and that 52,000 strong in Salt Lake was the loudest they heard. So it'll be interesting to see the way this game plays on neutral field. So Yogi, I know we're up against time, but I got to squeeze in one more for you. I've been talking about this for a few weeks now, and I actually heard you talk about it in a segment on Pac-12 Network just recently. And USC now sits at 4, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I know we got to play this game, but, you know, this is a podcast. We're here to talk anyway, so we can talk the future. I believe truly, even if, and I don't know if the committee will do this, but I think it's fair to at least talk about it. Even if TCU beats Kansas State, finishes the season undefeated, with USC, the stretch they went on now, and would then have, you know, 4 top 25 wins on the resume and 1 top 25 loss by 1 point, I believe they have a real shot to even jump TCU to go to 3 and potentially have a matchup with Michigan, which would be a beautiful, beautiful matchup. We saw obviously with the Rose Bowl games they've had back in the early 2000s, and then they could potentially have a better matchup, which then could propel them to a championship matchup right here in LA at SoFi. Am I crazy, or is that something that you think maybe could potentially happen?
Yeah, to your point, like I've kind of been talking about that, especially over the last 2 weeks. Knowing how the committee is supposed to think. I went to Dallas a couple years ago and did a mock selection committee, and I got to pretend to be the chair. It was Rob Mullins at the time, the athletic director at Oregon. He was there, and he would walk me through it, and I got to really see how they go through the selection process. So they chunk teams, they compare teams, and the goal is to go week by week. Thus, I was curious about this week. Now I get it. TCU played great. They blew out their opponent, and SC, it wasn't a blowout, but it was a dominant performance. I think we'd all agree if you watched the game against Notre Dame. So it was kind of like net neutral, So while I thought 2 weeks ago maybe there might be an argument to start talking about a jump, this week I don't think there was enough in terms of the way TCU played to make a jump. But I think this coming weekend, and we'll present to the committee on Thursday, as I was saying earlier, that point will be made, because if it's a tight game now, it's 3 versus 10 and 4 versus 11 in terms of the two title games in the current rankings. Not that much difference, especially when you're looking at 10 and 11, in my opinion. I imagine it was a close discussion of K-State versus Utah. Mm-hmm. I think if SC can win this game by 10, let's just call it, and I'm not into style points, but in terms of they win the game, and let's say the other game is tight, I think there's a world where that exists. I think if you look at both of them equally, and they're both 1-point wins, 3-point wins, 10-point wins, I don't see much changing. But I'm with you. Like, I do think that if these two teams face each other, there's a real world where you say SC should be ranked higher. Now, put a pin in that. Having coached at SC and been on a team that went undefeated in the regular season, that is way harder to do. That is way harder to do than a loss in the midseason, even in dramatic fashion. It was ultra motivating, all the things that the Utah loss was for the Trojan locker room. When you have to keep meeting the moment of we're undefeated, perfect record, that's a thing. So as much as I'd love to see SC 3, I think if TCU goes undefeated, like, we have to look at that and recognize in a conference that plays 9 conference games, you got to beat a team twice. I don't imagine the committee making that change. And I am down with that. Now, what I'm not down with is that if it's a 1-point loss, let's call it an epic game again, because I think it will be. Like, Utah will come to play, as we all know. Mm-hmm. The stadium's insane, dude. Like, it'll be louder than Rice Eccles. Now, granted, there'll be 50-50 fans, is at least what I'm told now. It'll be a sellout. It'll be off the hook, easily the best championship game in years, let alone the best championship game in the weekend in terms of the Pac-12 title game in its history. I look at it and I say, well, if SC loses in similar fashion, why should they, as a 2-loss team, be penalized and allow Ohio State to jump them, who aren't playing this weekend, gave up over 7 yards per carry against Michigan? I get it, the number 2 team in the land, arguably number 1, but they both beat Notre Dame. You could argue SC beat them more handily. They both have quality road wins in Oregon State and Penn State, but SC has another ranked win in the UCLA game on the road, and Ohio State doesn't have that. So that to me is like where I still think if it's a tight game and they lose, we should not just accept that the committee's never invited a 2-loss team when there's one other 1-loss team that sits out there. That 1-loss team didn't play this weekend. Mm-hmm. So that I'd be so curious. And I know you guys and SC fans, and we don't want to see that happen because you want to see a team from the PAC in the playoff. But they are, if they do lose close, I'd be really curious to know what the committee is talking about come Saturday and even Sunday morning when they make their final deliberations.
Yeah, we definitely talked about that on our last show. We went into the Ohio State resume hard and went into that. So, but hey, it's going to be a blast on Friday. When hopefully we'll run into you. First beers on me. Would love to hang out for a little bit, but thank you so much, Yogi, for taking the time. We love what you do. Big fans. You're fantastic. So thanks for jumping on the LA Football Show with us. We appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Congratulations again. I love what you're doing, and I love that you're doing it in our city. It's needed. It's amazing. And happy to come on anytime. Well, thanks so much, Yogi. Really appreciate it.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.